Now, quick overview of the Alta Conference one more time. You have the big three: Roosevelt of the US, Churchill of the UK, and Stalin of the USSR. Then they discussed the split of the four occupied zones, which US got a piece, the USSR, the UK, and of course, a little bit to France. And of course, you have the tensions between the Soviets and the Allies, but these tensions during this conference were actually not as bad as they will be in the last conference, which I'll get to in a minute. And of course, the USSR agreed to the war against Japan, which of course, to actually end Nazi Germany, as well as end Japan as well in their search for dominance of the world as well. And of course, as I said before, the free elections. As Russia was taking over and liberating most of Eastern Europe, they wanted to make an agreement that those countries, as they were liberated or freed from German occupation, would be able to hold free elections in order to instill more democracy in the area, which thus, in turn, as we know now, would produce the market or products for capitalism to infiltrate themselves in all avenues of the world in order to bring the U.S. from the bad brink of depression that they were in 1929 to making them a super economic powerhouse, which they are still today. And of course, one of the last couple tidbits, they wanted to punish the Nazi war criminals, so they agreed that they will punish them for killing 6 million Jews. And then also, they signed the charter that put into effect of the United Nations, which is a very, very important organization which still keeps, even today, a lot of stabilized countries together and a lot of peace to be had. And also the outcome of Nazi-occupied Poland, which of course Stalin wanted most of Poland to be extended by the borders of Russia, and for Poland thus in turn to extend their borders into Germany. Now, just a quick look. Russia on the east side, America on the bottom, France on the western side towards the bottom, and Britain towards the top where Hamburg is on the northwest side. Now brings us to the bad conference, which is actually the bad one, which is actually the Potsdam. It was a damn bad conference. So when you see Potsdam and the word damn, that means it was a damn bad conference. And why do I say that? Well, as I mentioned before, in Yalta, we got a lot of things done. Everything was very, very cordial. Everybody was agreeing, or at least compromising in a way to make everybody happy in some way. But it wasn't the fact in the Potsdam conference. And why is that? Well, you have now Truman is a new president into the scene. And Truman actually is the vice president of Roosevelt. Roosevelt actually died in April 1945, and this conference takes place in July 1945, only about 3 months after. So, basically, you have a new president, which is Truman of the United States, in place of Roosevelt. Then, where's Churchill? Where's my man Churchill? Well, he's gone as well. He lost the election to what is the name Clement Attlee, who was the prime minister during this conference and also the leader of the Labor Party at that time. And of course, you still got Stalin, and he ain't going nowhere until 1953 when he dies. So, this conference is actually the bad conference because Truman was not as easy on Stalin as Roosevelt was. Actually, Truman wanted to have some tough love against Stalin in order to bring Russia to its knees to stop them from actually doing any more spread of communism, which is where you get the Truman Doctrine from, which is something I will touch upon later. And then, of course, you have the new Prime Minister, Clement Attlee. And you can just see just by the body language. The Stalin, the USSR, is still sitting all chill, like, hey man, I got this. I'm the president. I'm the dictator of Russia, and nothing nobody can do about it. And then you have Truman, who is a little bit uneasy, but he seems pretty happy to be president of the United States now, because he went from vice president to actual president. In the United States, the only function of a vice president is in case the actual president dies, so we would actually have the whole political system still roll on without needing to hold another election, install any kind of laws or policies that would need to be put in during that period that the original president would have actually done. So you have Truman that replaced him, of course, and then Clement Attlee, as you can see his body language, he looks like he just, doesn't want to be there. Just, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. He's scary. He's a little weird, but at least he's American, so I could get along. Maybe I can make friends. He looks like the new kid in school. You know what I mean? He looks very awkward. Now, the Potsdam Conference took place in Germany, right about here. All right. So we have the Yalta Conference that took place right here in the Crimea, in the Black Sea, the peninsula of Crimea, which is now modern Ukraine. And then we have Germany, where Potsdam Conference was taking place in July 1945. And of course, as I mentioned before, this is U.S. President Harry S. Truman, who was not elected president. He was actually a vice president under Roosevelt, who rose to the position of President of the United States due to the fact that Roosevelt died of polio in April 1945. And then you have Prime Minister Clement Attlee, who basically won the election in England to take the place of Winston Churchill. Fact time, real quick. Now, in April 1945, you've had 3 deaths of cult of personalities. And when I say cult of personalities, people that are so big in their bravado and their actual actions as individuals among their nations had died. You have Roosevelt, who died in early April 1945. Then you had Mussolini, who died in mid-April. Then you had Hitler die in late April 1945. 3 of the biggest leaders of the world died. Mussolini for Italy, President Roosevelt for the US, and Hitler for Nazi-occupied Germany. Now, Hitler was born April 20th, and he died April 29th. So, that was a good belated birthday present, a death for somebody that was just so damn evil. All right, so quick rundown of the Potsdam Conference. Of course, we have the big 3. Now, it says Churchill on here, which Churchill did actually participate in the Potsdam Conference, but wasn't official because basically Clement Attlee was the one that originally took his place. But they respected Churchill so much that they allowed him to still attend. And so you have Truman took over for Roosevelt, Churchill, and of course Clement Attlee, and Stalin himself still there. And of course the meeting was more tense. And when I say the meeting was more tense, well basically when Truman met Stalin for the first time, America set off the first nuclear bomb only a week before the conference started in July of 1945. So Truman wanted to walk around talking it up, going, you know what? Hey Stalin, how's it going? How's the kids? How's the wife? Oh, by the way, we just set off one of the biggest bombs, the most destructive weapons in human history. So how about, how are things? So basically, he was pissing Stalin off. And when I say pissing him off, he was making him mad. Because he thought, what kind of audacity, what kind of person would just strut around and just make like they're better than Russia? Because nobody's better than Mother Russia. Of course, Truman thought so. And he thought America was better. So he wanted to tell Stalin about the knowledge of the new bomb, the nuclear bomb, that America had set off a week before, which also is the same bomb that they used to cripple Japan that they set off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 in August. And of course, they pressed Stalin for the free elections, and Stalin at this time said no free elections. And why was that? Because during the time of the Yalta Conference between February and July, well, Russia already took over most of the Eastern Bloc and the Eastern European countries. So he was already installing his own communist governments under the nose of the Allies, who additionally wanted, in order for Poland to be exchanged for free democratic elections. So Stalin went back on his word, not only wanted Poland, but he also wanted to install communist governments in all the Eastern Europe countries in order to that much increase the Soviet sphere. And then you have Stalin also saying in his speech that capitalism and communism cannot exist in the same world, which it cannot and will not, and that is the reason why we are having this lesson. Alright? So we can understand the dichotomy or the difference between these two political systems and what they do as far as to the individual. What is good as far as rights and liberties and freedom and democracy in comparison to dictatorship, oppression, and just plain old horrible ideas that doesn't let anybody survive the way they want to live. Now here's a quick clip of the rundown of the Yalta and the Potsdam Conference of 1945.
Was the deadliest conflict in human history. More than 50 million soldiers and civilians died during the fighting, including 300,000.
More than 50 million died in World War II. 50 million people.
Alone claimed the lives of 11 million. With the guns of aggression silenced, it was time to begin the long, slow task of rebuilding countries savaged by the fighting. In February 1945, 3 months before
This is the Yalta Conference.
Allied leaders met at Yalta in the Soviet Union to discuss Europe's reorganization. Other post-war plans were laid at the conference in Potsdam, Germany 5 months later.
Now the Potsdam Conference of 1945 in July.
President Truman expressed hope for a more peaceful time ahead.
We're here today to raise the flag of victory over the capital of our greatest adversary. In doing that, we must
This
remember
adversary means the enemy, which
that
is
in
Germany.
raising that flag, we are raising it in the name of the people of the United States who are looking forward to a better world, a peaceful
Preach it,
world,
Truman, preach it.
a world in which all the people will have an opportunity to enjoy the good things of life and not just a few at the top.
And when he means a few at the top, he means communism and their domination over individual rights and freedom.
Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. However,
All right.
distrust between the Soviets and the Western Allies escalated, ushering in a 15-year-long period of icy relations that would come to be called the Cold War.
There you go. All right. So these relations after the Potsdam Conference went downhill so far that we are now still feeling the effects of the Cold War even today. As you can see, even in the news, you can see still North Korea is still a problem for us. And it still continues that even relations between Russia and America in regards to the recent 2016 American election is something that is still a problem. Now, when many think the Cold War has ended, well, did it really end with it, or did it still going on just more softly? Now, of course, the post-World War II, America wanted to open markets that would actually prevent another depression that happened in America that almost crippled American industry and the liberties of the people themselves in order to make a better life for themselves. And this is what America wanted to do. They wanted to actually install not only democratic governments in Europe that were former Nazi-occupied or German-occupied countries, and also even some Russian countries. They wanted to install democratic governments in order to infiltrate capitalism ideas or capitalist ideas in order to further the U.S. market. And of course, promote democracy throughout the world, especially Asia and Africa. And of course, as I mentioned before, they tried to promote democracy in Asia, with Korea being an example between South Korea, which is Allied or American-owned, and North Korea, which was originally Soviet-owned. So obviously you have this fight between democracy and capitalism still happening even years after the World War II had ended. And then, of course, stop the spread of communism, the domino effect, which, of course, if you ever play dominoes, you hit one, and the one leads all the dominoes to be thrown down, thus creating a continuum of a spread of a political idea that is in contrast to the U.S. democracy and actual capitalism itself, which is the spread of communism, which is something that made America fear because it threatened the way of American life. And what were the post-World War II Cold War goals for the USSR? Well, as you can see in this diagram, or basically this chart here, you have this red line, which I will tell you in a little bit refers to the Iron Curtain. And what the Iron Curtain basically is a buffer between the USSR and, of course, Western Europe. Because Stalin and the USSR wanted to use Eastern Europe as a buffer zone between the West and Russia itself. Only for defensive reasons, because they thought they couldn't trust Germany again, because not only Germany attacked them in World War II, but they attacked them also in World War I as well. So they didn't want a third time happening. So their idea was if they dominated enough Eastern European countries, then they would be able to have a buffer zone between Moscow itself and the Western Europe and the Western allies as well. And of course, with this, tens of millions of people in World War II and in Stalin's purges died because of these ideas that happened. Tens of millions of people have died because of a couple political ideas. That's how strong or how powerful an idea is. And then also, of course, like I said before, they feared a strong Germany. Even though Germany was destabilized and then stabilized again through the occupation of the Western Allies in Russia, it actually really wasn't, because Russia was using the eastern side of Germany for their own agendas, while the western side of Germany was actually trying to go under a new construction of democracy and freedom, which is what the West intended to do for most of Europe, but the USSR put the brakes on that. And of course, establish defensive borders, as I said before, a buffer zone, a defensive buffer zone between the USSR and Western Europe. And of course, they want to encourage friendly governments on its borders, which is the Eastern Europe again, which includes Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and then Estonia and Lithuania, etc., etc. And they also want to put communist governments in these European countries, also even communist governments around the world, and thus to further the Soviet sphere of influence, which make Russia much more influential and much stronger economically, politically, and militarily. Now this political cartoon, as you can see, this is the Iron Curtain I was speaking about before. That is the red line, or basically the buffer between Western Europe, the Western Allies, and Eastern Europe and Russia. As you see, this little character right here with the cigar is Churchill. And basically, Churchill, he's looking under the curtain, the Iron Curtain, as what's really under there? What are they doing on the other side? And as you can see, everything on the other side is dark and abysmal and just depressing. You even have a guy with a gun on the other side, making sure no one gets to the other side of where Russia can have full control over Eastern Europe. So, 1946 comes around. We're about almost a year after the Potsdam Conference. Tension's still high, Russia's still doing what they want, but the war of World War II had died down. So Churchill visits a college in Missouri. Well, actually not Missouri, Michigan. He visits a college or a university in Michigan where he gives one of his most famous speeches there. And along there you have President Truman as well accompanying Churchill during the speech. And this speech is actually what a lot of people actually think or actually it is when the Cold War actually started, when Churchill said that there was an Iron Curtain descending upon Eastern Europe. From the Stettin to Trieste, Iron Curtain has fallen upon Eastern Europe. All right? And you can see, I have a video where he has such passion in what he was saying. He was trying to rile up and warn the American and British people of such a political idea that could threaten the way of life for all the West. And of course, Stalin calls his speech an act of war, which thus begins the Cold War, which is where we're up to now, 1946. Now I'm going to put on my best British accent, so give me a second. From Stettin to the Baltic, to Trieste in the Adriatic, an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lies all the capitals of the ancient cities of Central and Eastern Europe. Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest, and Sofia. All these famous cities and the populations around them lie in what I must call the Soviet sphere. And all are subject in one form or another, not only to Soviet influence, but to a very high and in some cases increasing measure of control from Moscow. Pretty strong words. And to Stalin, they'd be fighting words. So, here's a little clip of Churchill during that speech.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the
Hear the
Adriatic,
tone of his voice, how serious, the magnitude of what he's speaking about.
behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe. Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest, and Sofia. All these famous cities and the populations around them lie in what I must call the Soviet sphere. And all are subject, in one form or another, not only to Soviet influence, but to a very high and in some cases increasing measure of control from Moscow.
All right, so that was the speech that started the Cold War. But is the Cold War over? No, we're just at 1946. We got up until 1989. But we're going to get that to next time. So thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And as always, it's been a pleasure.